Welcome to the regular Monday night class Against the Stream Meditation Center here in Venice Beach, California. This is a ongoing Buddhist Sangha. The word Sangha means community, a place to practice the Dharma. The Dharma means the truth about reality, nature of reality that we live in, and how to live in a way that alleviates suffering rather than causes it. All of the Buddha's teachings have the aim, have the goal, have the intention to empower us to respond to reality in a way that alleviates suffering rather than causes it. And we'll start with a period of meditation. Actually, maybe I'll say a few things before we meditate, and then we will have some lecture and discussion. I think I'll say a few things because tonight we're going through the Heart of the Revolution book, my book, Heart of the Revolution, that is about developing emotional intelligence and wise responses and what we call the heart practices of Buddhism, the Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes or wise aspects of our mind and heart. And last week we talked about mercy and the ability through meditation, a core part of what mindfulness teaches us by just sitting and bringing present time, non-judgmental, kind awareness into the body, the heart, the mind. That one of the functions is learning to be uncomfortable, of turning towards our discomfort, our pain, our difficulties with more and more tolerance rather than avoiding, but turning towards our pain to feel it. And the more you do sitting meditation and the longer you sit still, of course, you'll become physically uncomfortable and probably some difficult thoughts and emotions will arise. And all of that from a Buddhist mindfulness perspective is important and is an opportunity and is a core part of our practice, because where we're going tonight into the topic from mercy, which is the not making it worse, tolerating without making it worse, into not just tolerating, not just mercy, but the practice of compassion and the response, learning to respond to both our pain and the pain of others, the pain of the world, both the pain of the people that we know and care about, as well as the pain of strangers and even the pain of our enemies, of being able to see more deeply, more clearly that everyone has pain, that pain is part of what's going on here, and how we respond to our pain is what creates either ease or happiness or suffering. So I'm gonna talk on, I'll share quite a few things about compassion and the Buddha's teachings on compassion and how we can train our mind to respond with compassion, our hearts. But I wanted to do a meditation before that, a compassion meditation that we borrow from a Tibetan practice, and it's called Tonglen. And it translates as something like receiving and giving, or giving and receiving, giving compassion and receiving pain. You know, compassion is the wise response to pain. And in order to have compassion, we have to allow ourselves to feel the pain, turn towards it. And in this practice, we actually intentionally breathe in and visualize and breathe in pain. And then breathe out and visualize and breathe out compassion. You don't have to feel compassionate to do this practice. This is, in some ways, is training the mind. It's creating neural pathways. It is inclining this attitude of compassion. And if you're anything like me, the first few times you do these practices, you might not feel much. It might even make you feel a bit agitated. I know in my early practices on loving kindness and compassion and forgiveness, it didn't feel warm and fuzzy. It felt painful and difficult. And I still had a lot of aversion and judgment and fear about the kind of vulnerability that this kind of practice is asking us to embody. So I invite you, I encourage you to not judge the practice too much or to not give up on it too quickly, but to know that it's a very gradual, a long-term process of uncovering and recovering and learning to meet our pain with mercy and tolerance and compassion, and to meet other people's pain, the pain of the world, with tolerance and mercy and compassion. And that it's a process that for most of us will take years. It's not something that we can just decide. And it's why we meditate. We meditate to develop these skills. And these are skills that are gradually embodied over years and years of meditation. So if you're at the beginning, you have a long process to look forward to. And if you've been, doing this for months or years or decades, then you know what I'm talking about. Shit doesn't change overnight. You don't immediately become compassionate, but slowly the sort of needle changes, and the internal attitudes and the ability to respond more and more consistently, more and more regularly in a compassionate way is something that we develop over the years. So I encourage you to follow along with the instructions best you can, and feel what you feel, and let yourself feel whatever is there to be felt. And to know that you can do this. And it's important, not only can, but it's important to do it. So find a way to sit upright, relaxed. Take a moment to adjust your posture, to settle. And to know that this meditation is the practice of the first and third noble truth. It is a practice of breathing in the first noble truth, the pain, the suffering in our lives and in the world, and breathing out the third truth, compassion, the intention to end suffering, to extinguish, to cool, to chill out, respond with kindness and compassion to the pain that exists, both internally and externally. So just settling in by releasing any tension that your body may be holding. Relaxing the shoulders, the jaw, belly. Feel the breath coming and going. And if you can, imagine breathing in and out of your heart center. Feel the expanding and contracting of the chest, rising and falling. That place in the center of the sternum where we experience joy and sorrow. And in this practice, we are active, engaging the mind to reflect, not ignoring the mind or trying to silence it. But reflect first on the pain of your own life, the difficulties you've lived through, the sorrows, the losses, the disappointments, the betrayals. The pain of craving, the suffering of attachment. The pain of anger, the suffering of resentment. All of the unpleasant sensations of having a body, the aches, the pains, the injuries, the illnesses. The suffering of heartbreak, of loneliness. How painful it is to have a mind that is judgmental, critical, insecure. Don't have to make anything up, just what's true about your experience. Either in the past or here, now, in the present. Turning towards our pain, the first noble truth. We've all had plenty of suffering in our lives. Losing what we wanted to keep. Being met with painful experiences we never wanted to experience. And the sickness and aging and death of existence. And now beginning to breathe into your own heart center the pain and suffering you've experienced. And breathe out compassion towards your own pain. Breathe in the pain, allow yourself to feel it. Real or imagined, present or past. Breathe out compassion, the intention to meet your own pain with friendliness, with care. With a love and tenderness that you would show your own child, that you would show a loved one. And begin to visualize that you're breathing in smoke and that it's hot, heavy, like soot. This is the pain of your life. Breathe it into the heart center, and the heart has the ability to transform, to purify. As you breathe out, breathing it out as purified compassion, no longer heavy and hot, but now cool, light, soothing. Compassion soothes the pain, removes the suffering. It still hurts, but it soothes that extra layer of resistance. Breathing in your own painful experience in the body and the heart and the mind. The fears, the worries, the feelings of unworthiness, shame. Breathing out tenderness towards how painful it is to have those feelings. In, hot, heavy, painful. Breathing out light, soft, soothing, care. If the mind starts to wander into stories, resistance, just come back to the breath at the heart center. And it can be as simple as just saying pain as you breathe in, compassion as you breathe out in your own heart mind. Acknowledge that we're breathing in our own pain. And then we're training the heart mind to respond to pain with compassion, breathing out compassion towards it. beginning to expand from ourselves, to think about people who we have benefited from knowing, who've inspired us, our teachers, mentors, sponsors, therapists, our grandparents, people who've been kind to you, who've helped you. And breathing in their pain, knowing that even the most evolved, wisest being still has pain. Could even think of the Buddha, even the enlightened Buddha so long ago, who said even though he was no longer suffering, he had quite a bit of pain still. Breathing in the pain of the Buddha, breathing out compassion, care, tenderness. Bringing to mind some of the teachers who have supported you, inspired you, friends. And breathing in their pain into your heart center. Reflecting on that they too experienced this first noble truth, the reality of difficulty, unpleasantness in their own minds, in their own hearts and bodies. Breathing it in with the same visualization, dark, heavy, hot, soot, pain. In the heart, purifying it, breathing out, soothing, clear, compassionate breath. It can be as simple as just saying, I care about you. I care about your pain. If the visualization doesn't work so well, just saying the word pain as you breathe in, compassion as you breathe out. And it's okay if this hurts. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's part of the training. It's completely safe to feel pain. The only way we'll learn to have true compassion is by turning towards our pain, turning towards the pain of others. Expand the practice to include friends and family. Allowing ourselves to see the suffering, the difficulties of those who we care about. And to breathe it in to the heart center, breathing in the pain, the confusion, the suffering. Breathing out the intention to meet our friends, our family, our loved ones with mercy and compassion rather than judging or avoiding. Turning towards it and breathing compassion. And allow them to receive your compassion and to appreciate it. Feels so good to be seen, to be cared about. If you notice your belly getting tight or your jaw or your shoulders tensing up, take a moment to release, to soften with the compassionate exhale, softening the belly. And let the gathering, imagine that you're in a large space with all of these people, your teachers, your family and friends. And let it expand. See who else in your life shows up in your mind, in your heart. See their pain. Breathe in their pain. Breathe out compassion towards them. And allow some of the difficult people in your life to enter. See that it is their pain that makes them difficult. Rather than meeting them with judgment and fear, resentment, try breathing compassion towards them. Breathing in their pain, their confusion. Breathing out mercy and compassion towards the difficult people. the category that we sometimes call our enemies. And begin to expand outward throughout your neighborhood, throughout your state. To the east and west, north and south. And reflect on all the suffering, all of the pain, all of the confusion, the ignorance, the greed, hatred on this planet. And breathe in the suffering. Breathe out compassion. Extend compassion in all directions, east and west, north and south. The Buddha said that after his awakening, he was able to radiate compassion for all living beings. We incline our heart towards compassion, compassion to the pain of all living beings as we breathe it in, hot, heavy. And we breathe out compassion as a soothing response. It doesn't end the pain, it just ends that extra layer of suffering. It ends the fear, it ends the judgment, the resentment, the anger. all of the people dying in this moment, all of the people that care about those dying people's grief, the people who don't have enough resources, food, the people who are not safe in war zones, in prisons, people who are not safe inside their own homes. So much suffering on this planet. But our capacity for compassion, for care, the wise response is massive. It's big enough to care about all sentient beings. And go beyond the human realm to include all animals, those in the wild as well as in captivity. Those in the sea, in the sky, in the earth. All beings who have a nervous system of any kind experience pain. All pain is worthy of compassion. When we don't have compassion, we suffer. So we practice in this way, breathing it in, turning towards it, so that we can end our own suffering about our own pain or our suffering about other people's pain. Learn to care about it. But also understand that no matter how much compassion we have, we can't control others. We can't end the internal experience of suffering for anyone else. So spending the last couple of minutes of this meditation wishing, extending compassion in the form of the wish, may all beings learn to meet their own pain with mercy and compassion. May all beings develop a wise heart, a compassionate mind through their own efforts. And then just come back to yourself, this life form that is you, that you have the most influence over. Sending yourself compassion, sending yourself forgiveness, sending yourself acceptance of yourself just as you are in this moment. With all of our imperfections, neurotic tendencies, all of the ways that we suffer. Compassion, forgiveness, acceptance of ourselves. And when you're ready, you can allow your eyes to open. It's good to reflect after we meditate. There's the experience and we're in it and whatever's happening is happening, and then the bell rings and now it's like this, and there's some relief from moving the body, but reflect on what just happened as you did this meditation, visualization, breathing in your own pain, trying to breathe out compassion. Is it, if you've been doing it for a while, is it getting easier? Have you developed some level of mercy and compassion towards your own pain over the period of your meditation practice, whether it's days or months or years? And maybe I think one of the core things is with these practices is that sometimes we do see where we're at and it's not so, doesn't feel like such good news. But making that commitment to keep going. Making that commitment to, I'm going to keep practicing in this direction. I'm going to keep inclining my heart and training my mind to learn to meet pain with care rather than aversion, rather than creating suffering on top of pain. So this chapter in the book is this teaching, is this core, and it's so important. And the only way to truly have some peace, to really have some ease and a pervasive sense of well-being in life, is to learn to meet pain with compassion. There's just no way to truly be happy, and by happy I mean at ease, and I mean content, and I mean free from suffering. Without compassion, it's impossible. There's nobody anywhere ever that had true happiness that didn't have compassion. Because there's just too much unpleasantness in existence. We're just born into these bodies that experience way too much unpleasant sensation and unpleasant emotion and unpleasant smells and tastes and sounds and people and places and things. And there's just too many unpleasant experiences to ever truly be happy without being able to tolerate unpleasantness, without being able to have mercy for unpleasantness, without really having compassion, ultimately compassion. And this is, the Buddha's teaching and his experience and one of the reasons why he said this path leads against the stream. Because unfortunately, when it comes to the type of pervasive compassion that we need for ourselves, for our own pain, as well as for the pain of our enemies and our friends and our and strangers and all living beings, nobody is born with it. It's not something that comes with birth. It is a skill we have to develop. We're actually born into a system that hates pain. As you know, just reflecting on your own life. And you're not weird, you're normal, right? It's totally and completely normal to have this instinctual drive of fight. If something is painful, you feel threatened, you feel either fight it or run or flee or freeze. Like what's your go-to when something hurts? Do you freeze around it? Do you run from it? Avoidance, that's the big one for most of us, trying to get rid of all of the unpleasantness in life. Probably more than half of our Sangha tried so hard to get rid of all of the unpleasantness that we became addicts. That we, drank and smoked and injected ourselves right into addiction from trying to avoid our pain and chase pleasure. And then you just, we all have woken up to that it's fucking impossible. You can't stay high long enough. You can't stay ahead of your own pain because of impermanence. And impermanence is such a mixed blessing, isn't it? Like it's, it sucks because you can't permanently avoid your pain. You can't, no matter how good at avoidance and you get, you can't permanently avoid it. It's impermanent. All of those avoidance, whether it's drugs and alcohol or some other ways that you avoid. And, just think for a minute, what are all the skills that you've developed to try to stay comfortable and avoid discomfort? But then again, impermanence is really good news when life is painful and you realize it will pass. That this shit will pass, no matter how difficult it is. However, the reality that we live in this world of impermanence, where pain, a certain amount of pain, is unavoidable. Now, I do want to pause for a moment and be clear that what Buddhism is teaching us is not some sort of masochistic, you need to seek out pain and indulge in pain. It's not that at all, actually. I believe that the way I would say it is the core teaching and understanding is avoid all of the pain that you can actually avoid. If it's avoidable, if there's something that you can do, then do it, don't, take your hand out of, when you're getting burned, like if you can remove your hand from the flame, from the fires, then do that. But the reality is there's a whole bunch of unpleasant, painful, difficult experiences that are just unavoidable. And it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's just unavoidable. First noble truth. There's all of these unavoidable difficulties that we will end up suffering about if we don't develop compassion. I mean, just today, how many unpleasant things happened today? I was in a meeting this morning and we were doing mindfulness and mindfulness of breath and body. And one of the people sharing said, I was sitting here doing mindfulness, but my dog was in the room and it just kept farting. And so I'm breathing in with non-judgmental, kind awareness, this really unpleasant smell. And so like reflecting on, that, and that's painful, right? Like dog farts are painful. And, and I want to be clear that when we're talking about the pain and the unpleasantness of existence, we're not talking just about the major tragedies and traumas and heartbreaks and physical, injuries and stuff. We're talking about all of the unpleasant phenomena that we just meet with aversion and that we naturally are like, oh, that's disgusting, that's painful, that's hard to bear, it's gross, whatever it is. And even dog farts as an object of compassion, of like, well, this is really unpleasant. I can hate it and then suffer about it, or I can breathe out compassion towards the dog farts. I can breathe out tolerance and mercy. And, right now it just really smells very unpleasant in here. I hope that makes sense. I know it's sort of a ludicrous example, but I hope that it makes sense that when we're talking about compassion, it's from the ordinary, everyday, like I had to stand in a line and that was unpleasant, or I got stuck in traffic and that was unpleasant, or I got cold and it was painful. I know like most of the country has like all of these major storms and people are snowed in and, and in a lot of places. I was talking to a friend in Oklahoma and I heard somebody this morning in Texas saying like, it doesn't really snow here, but it's like 0 degrees and we're not fucking prepared. And, it's unpleasant. So from the daily difficulties, we develop compassion so that we can tolerate all of the unpleasantness. It's unavoidable. Dogs are going to fart. Snowstorms are going to come. We're going to get stuck in traffic. We're going to have to wait in lines. We're going to have to deal with unpleasant people. Did you have to, if you left your house today, or people that you live with that were unpleasant, that were difficult, and it's painful when you're with somebody who's being unpleasant in some way. And so compassion becomes the skillful response to everything that we perceive as painful. Every smell, every sight, every taste, every sound. And again, it's your perception. I've been reflecting a lot on like perception of music, of how two people can have such different tastes, have such different perceptions, is that like I could put on some music and to me it would be like so pleasant, and there'd just be joy that this grindcore noise metal, and I would just love it. But like my mom would be like, that is making my ears bleed, like please, like it's so painful. And it's all perception, right? So for her, the practice would be like, well, Mom, you're gonna have some compassion for how unpleasant that is. And for me, it'd be like joy. And then somebody else could put on like some top 40 or some, I was visiting a friend this weekend and he had on just like Spotify, some kind of like, I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, like it was all terrible in my, perception. And rather than suffering about it and judging it and being just like, it's not my taste in music, of just kind of like, okay, like I can, hear it, and I can actually like take some compassion, because it's unpleasant to hear stuff that we don't like. When we have these, especially if you have strong ideas about what you think is good music and what other people think is good music. I feel like there's a really pervasive confusion about compassion, and that often compassion is thought to be, we talk about like compassionate action. And like even sometimes I've heard meditation students say, I was really uncomfortable during the meditation. So out of compassion for myself, I decided to shift and, fidget and move out of the, now, because in meditation, we are training ourselves to develop tolerance, to develop mercy, to develop a wise and compassionate response. Actually, shifting away from this pain is avoidance. It's not actually compassion. The compassionate thing to do is to sit with our pain, is to turn towards it, to breathe into it, to soften around it, and to increase our tolerance for discomfort, so that when the dog farts, when the heart gets broken, when we are faced with something really unpleasant, difficult, painful, we have developed that skill. So in meditation, the most compassionate thing to do for yourself is sit still. No matter how uncomfortable it gets, to breathe into it, to to try to have compassion for the pain rather than avoiding the pain. Because it's been the trying to avoid our pain that got us into all of this suffering in the first place, because it's unavoidable. But it's tricky, right? Because I did just say, avoid avoidable pain, have compassion for all of the unavoidable pain. But how often does your mind tell you that you can avoid it, and this sort of delusion of control? Of like, well, all I have to do, like, I don't have to sit here. I have the influence, I have the control of, like, I can just shift out of it. I can move away from it. Or I don't have to smell that fart. I can just leave the room. Or I don't have to wait in this line. I'm going to do this shit online. Or I don't have to, and they're just constantly all day, every day going like, well, I'm not going to deal with this because I don't have to. I'm not going to deal with this where it becomes this life. And how many of us have lived this life of constantly trying to avoid and replace and ignore and postpone anything that feels difficult, that stinks, or is boring, or is unpleasant. So in meditation, we develop compassion so that you can stand in that line and not suffer about it. So that you can be stuck in that traffic jam and not suffer about it. So that you can smell the disgusting smells, see the unpleasant things, hear the unpleasant things, and develop a sense of tolerance and ease and compassion for like, oh yeah, this is really unpleasant, but I've developed the skill of being with unpleasantness. I don't have to suffer about it anymore. I hope this is making sense, so that really compassion is a very practical and necessary skill that we have to develop. And we develop it through sitting meditation and training the mind, because it's not how our minds are wired. It's not a natural thing that any of us are born with. It is counter instinctual to meet all pain with compassion. And there's a lot of discernment that has to be developed on the path. And that question of, and each moment that question of, is this the kind of pain that I should be meeting with compassion in the form of just accepting it and caring about it? Or is this the kind of pain that I should do something about other than compassion? Because a lot of the times there is something that we can do. But we have to develop that wisdom, that discernment of, is this the kind of pain that can be avoided and should? You know, like if you're in a really bad relationship, we don't want to use compassion as this like, well, yes, I'm really being abused in this relationship, whether it's personal or professional or whatever it is. But because I have so much compassion, I'm just going to continue to tolerate it as my spiritual practice. It's like, that's not wisdom. If you're, you know, if you're in a really unhealthy environment and you can leave it, it's actually the compassionate thing to do, to leave it. Both for yourself, and also there's a perspective that the most compassionate thing you can do for somebody who's abusing or betraying or is to remove yourself from the equation because of all the karma they're creating through their negative behavior. You don't want to condone that kind of behavior. You don't want to participate in it. So we have to be quite careful for this idea that compassion is always going to remove the difficulty. That sometimes, perhaps even often, compassion is just caring about it without getting rid of the pain. And that is the, you know, maybe the most important understanding of compassion, that compassion doesn't actually, when we're talking about the unavoidable pain kind of compassion, it does not alleviate the pain. Compassion alleviates that extra layer of suffering. It removes the anger, the resentment, the fear, the extra layers of suffering that are on top of the pain. Pain is impermanent. It will alleviate itself. Compassion doesn't get rid of pain, just that extra layer of difficulty that we're constantly, you know, every time the dog farts, am I going to suffer about this? Or am I going to accept that this is an impermanent, unpleasant experience? Or am I going to hate it? Or am I going to get upset about it? Every time we're, you know, faced with a difficulty, we have impermanence as the great liberator. It will pass. Hatred will make it worse. And actually, aversion, that tendency that we have, that we're born with, that human beings, this aversive, you know, second noble truth, the cause of suffering is this craving that turns into aversion for things to be other than they are. And it feels like, you know, there's this impermanent experience coming through. And when we meet it with aversion, with like, no, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to smell this, I don't want to experience this, it creates a dam. Rather than letting that arise and pass, the aversion like keeps it around longer. Like, think of some of the resentments you've been holding on to for all of these decades. Something really painful happened in your life 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But the resistance to it, the lack of compassion for it, the lack of forgiveness for yourself or for the asshole who hurt you, betrayed you in some way, that aversion is like, here I am 30 years later, still pissed off at the schoolyard bully. who was, rather than forgiving, rather than letting go, rather than having compassion for myself, enough compassion to let it go, to forgive, rather than having compassion for like, man, that person must have really been suffering a lot to treat me like that. We keep it around, we cling to it, we get attached to that dam. I love this Tonglen practice that we did tonight, and I'm happy to have some discussion about it. Not everybody likes it all that much. It's pretty intense to breathe in the suffering of the whole world. I personally like intense experiences. So it's one of the meditations that I like. I know that's not true for everyone. But I really believe, the Buddha said, hey, here's the first noble truth. And the truth of suffering, of pain, of existence is not just an intellectual thing to believe. The four noble truths of the Buddha, these are not just like, hey, believe this. He's saying, investigate it, turn towards it. I don't know what the Pali term is, but it gets translated as penetrate this truth. Dive into it, know it from direct, in-depth experience. So it's not just this sort of surface, like, yeah, there's suffering. Breathe it in. Turn towards it. Feel it. And then the end of suffering, the third noble truth, breathe out compassion. Breathe out the antidote to suffering. And that we can do it for ourselves, that we can do it for our teachers. I don't know what it was like. I'd never done that before, of saying like, let's breathe in the pain of the Buddha. Because right, we think of the Buddha as, well, he's enlightened. He doesn't have any suffering. It's true. The Buddha has no suffering, but the Buddha still has pain. And whether you're suffering about it or not, pain is still worthy of compassion. And what a wonderful object of thinking of Siddhartha Gautama 2,600 years ago. This person we're so grateful discovered mindfulness, taught us the Four Noble Truths, like started this wheel of Dharma in motion. And that even though he had developed enough compassion for his own pain that he wasn't suffering at all, he still walked around barefoot for 40 years, and he was attacked and his foot was smashed. So for the last many years of his life, he was limping on a broken foot. He said that he had extreme pain, like chronic ongoing pain in his body. He had like a back pain, and that, he said, I'm not suffering about it, but my body, just towards the end of his life especially, he says, my body hurts all the time. He said, the only time I'm not in physical discomfort is when I'm meditating in the jhanas, those deep, deep concentration states. The rest of the time, I'm in pain. But I have compassion for it, so I'm not suffering about it, but it's still unpleasant. I don't hate it. I don't resent it. I totally accept that, like, this is just what this body is feeling, unpleasantness. But that's the potential of the kind of compassion that we can develop, where even in chronic pain, you can tolerate it and have mercy and compassion towards it. And that all of our enemies, I didn't go too far in the Tonglen, I was saying so much anyways, but thinking about how important this is in the current political scene, the current American political scene, where it's so, so much conflict and so much anger towards the other side, whatever side, and I feel like, it's like, in American politics, it's like they're talking about like this two-party system, the Democrats and the Republicans, and the Democrats hate the Republicans and the Republicans hate the Democrats. But I feel like I know all of these people who are just like, they're both terrible. There's this whole sort of third anti-political kind of party that like hate anybody who cares, anybody that even believes in the American system is fucked up and full of shit. And, this whole anti, I guess we call them conspiracy theory. It's all a conspiracy. And it is, but still, like, compassion is the answer towards our enemies, in this practice of like, no matter how confused somebody is, don't have to suffer at them. No matter how ignorant, how, off base, we don't have to give them our suffering by judging and fearing and hating each other. Out of compassion for ourselves, out of compassion for the confusion of our enemies, we can accept people as they are. We can forgive people. We can allow everyone to have their views and their opinions and their confusion. That having been said, I don't want to go so far in the acceptance that it sounds like a kind of complacency or an inaction. I do 100% believe in karma, and that there is a karmic consequence for ignorance and for greed and for hatred, and that everyone's creating that for ourselves. And that also consequences, that, whatever sort of legal action or stuff like that should be, we do need that in place. I'm not a complete anarchist. We do need some structure to society, and we just happen to have inherited a pretty fucked up one. But still, compassion is the right response. It's the wise response to all of the pain, all of the confusion. You can compassionately hold people accountable for their actions without doing it out of anger, without doing it out of hatred. So, what are your thoughts? We have a few minutes left. Does compassion make sense to you? Any questions about this topic?
Noah, this is Eric. I have a question.
Sure, jump in.
Yeah, can you hear me? Good.
Yes.
And I thank you for this. This was a great session today, and I have in part a reaction that's similar to when I've looked at this through meditation, the book, other books. I still find it easier, and even reflecting on today, I'm learning more about what compassion is not, but I still couldn't even begin to give you a definition of what it is. And I find that what you end up having to do, and part of this might be translation, I have no idea, but you'll say mercy, tolerance, you have more tolerance, don't sweat the small stuff. And all of that makes perfect sense. And still there seems to be something more active, something more definitive. It's not just not to all those other things, it's something else. And I don't know if that sparks another thought in you, but I'd love to hear anything.
So is the question, what is the actual definition?
Yeah, I guess that'd be one way, but I've asked that to other people before, and then they get, empathy, mercy, and then, all these other words. And then I go, well, what, I think I know what those mean, but if it just means those, then why do we need this word compassion?
How about, let's talk about it for a minute. How do you feel about caring?
Yeah, that's clearer to me.
The word that we translate as compassion is karuna, Karuna. And I'm told that the literal translation of karuna is a quivering of the heart in response to pain. That which means that we're actually feeling moved, and so for me, caring can be a little intellectual. You can be a little bit in your head around like I care, but that karuna is actually a feeling. Compassion is actually a movement in this term heart, chitta, is both mind and body, heart and mind. So that you feel moved, that you care, like really care, like a tenderness. You feel moved by your own pain. You care about it that much. You feel moved by somebody else's pain. Then it's not just an intellectual exercise. And for many of us, it is sort of just theoretical. Compassion is theoretical, and it's why we do the meditation over and over for all of these, years, so that we can start to actually feel it more. And this visualization of breathe it in, feel it, let it affect your heart. Breathe out compassion. We're so busy trying to avoid pain rather than develop compassion towards it. I hope that's helpful.
It is helpful, and maybe just the dog fart story threw me. I think for the big stuff, that's really clear.
Yeah.
And then caring about a dog fart. But I get your point. The point is, you let it in. It affects you. You face it. It's not that you're pretending it didn't happen. You're experiencing it, but you're not being reactive to it.
Yeah, and that's also where, on the continuum of compassion is also just tolerance. Because, the dog fart, it's not like, oh, my heart is just so moved by this painful dog fart. It's, I can tolerate this, right? Like I've learned to just accept and tolerate, like unpleasant shit happens. And I don't have to hate it, like the non-reactivity.
Super helpful. Thanks. I don't want to gobble up any more time. I see lots of hands. Thanks.
Yeah, nice to see you. Jeffrey, jump in.
Real quick, I hope this doesn't seem too trivial, but I guess I'm motivated by the dog fart subtopic. I'll be on the cushion and my cat decides that's a good time to cuddle as well. And, cats need, and they put their claws in. And this very question has occurred to me because she's digging into my flesh with her claws. And it's not like my back hurts or my knees are sore. It's actually quite painful. And so I have wondered in the middle of meditation, how much do I put up with this before I kind of scoot her along so I can zero back in, Where's the compassion line?
It's hard, it's hard for me to answer it. I want to say something like, it depends on how desperate you are to develop compassion, because the more you let her scratch you or him scratch you, them scratch you, right? And really, like, what an opportunity for, advanced compassion. Right. Of like not just my achy knees, but also cat claws. And if I can develop compassion for this, like, the next time I get my heart broken, or it's going to be, smooth sailing, because I've really developed this. And there's, there are certainly Buddhists who go, to really in service of compassion, of saying, like, let's do some really unpleasant, extreme kind of painful practices so that we get really good at it, so that nothing can faze us. That having been said, probably achy knees and sore back and loud mind is enough unpleasantness. And, you can gently, push your cat away when it starts kneading your, knees while you're meditating.
Thank you.
Yeah. Amy, jump in.
Literally jumping in. harshing on the dog farts, man. So I had an unfortunate experience the other day that some of my stuff got stolen. And in the daytime, I felt like I was pretty equanimous about it. Like, well, sucks. It happens. I'm lucky. I can afford to buy more skis, blah, blah, blah. Then at like 3:00 in the morning, I'm just straight up angry about it. And then for a few days, it's a little bit better now. I was in like full on addict planning mode around everything possible related to my shit that got stolen. And I talked to a very wise friend of mine about it. And did I just need to feel the anger about it? And because I didn't feel the anger, then I immediately am going into planning mode because I'm avoiding that. And how does that fit in all of this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes some sense. I don't know the answer necessarily, but I hear, that kind of process of, rather than allowing ourselves to feel the sadness, the betrayal, the fear, the anger that is on top of that hurt of, being stolen from. If we immediately go to this like, oh, no big deal, I can afford it. And rather than kind of landing in, wow, this hurts. Yes, I can afford new skis or whatever, but still, this is quite unpleasant to have my car, my possessions stolen, and to feel that pain. And that the more we immediately train ourselves to feel the pain, then we can process it. And I think that that's what you were pointing towards, is that if we don't process our pain and have hopefully some level of mercy and compassion for it, that then often the mind will kind of keep coming back to it. I'm not sure if your obsession with, it sounds like shopping, had that much to do with the loss, or just like, now I need new skis and now I get to fucking shop. And so my mind is going, well, what kind, now I can get new skis. What should I get? So I'm not sure if it was just like the mind going like, cool, I have an excuse to spend some money now.
Right. It was that, and just like planning so many other things, not really related to trips, not related to trips, everything else. It was just, oh.
Right.
And then I thought, after Rachel and I talked about it, and then I was like, oh, okay, that'll make sense. And then I got more confused here in the talk tonight. So I don't know.
Confused how? Of like my encouragement to sit in it?
Yeah. Whereas I wasn't sitting in it because I feel like I wasn't sitting in it because I was having compassion for it.
Right.
So I was kind of avoiding feeling the pain, if you want to call it. I was mostly just super fucking annoyed, but I feel like maybe I was avoiding feeling the pain of the situation because I was having compassion for it.
Yeah, but you're not. I think that, in order to really have compassion for it, we have to be feeling the pain.
There it is.
And, we have to go right into it. Not just intellectualizing a sort of like acceptance, but actually like, whoa, this really sucks.
Yeah, that was it.
I mean, you heard me talk about, a few months ago when my motorcycle got stolen. Yeah, and there's just that like, wow, this fucking hurts. And this is, and processing that, and then coming around to acceptance, but not going right into like, oh, no big deal. First being like, wow, this is really painful.
Yeah, I totally intellectualized the acceptance of it and skipped the middle part.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks, Rachel.
Rachel Elwood, your next and last question, I think.
Hi. So I had a question about like in practice, like in everyday life. It makes more sense, say I'm sitting in traffic and I can either get really frustrated or I can like take a breath and just kind of sit in it. But I use meditation as like I would say my primary coping skill. And so when I'm having, say, a conflict with somebody and I have the opportunity to do so, I'll kind of step away and sit for a few minutes. But when I do that, I guess maybe I've been doing it like wrong, according to this, talk. I kind of use it as an opportunity to like ground myself in the moment, but I don't necessarily feel into the anger that I'm experiencing toward this other person. And so I guess I'm just wondering, like, in practice, is that what you're recommending? Because it has helped to diffuse situations, and I think that it's been helpful to me, but.
Well, couple things. One is trust your own experience, and if what you have been doing and stepping away and cooling off and diffusing the situation has been, like, trust that, like, regardless of, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a big fan of trusting our own experience and not what teachers are saying. So, trust that if that's working for you some. There is this perspective that says, rather than, like, if you're going to take that time, rather than just sort of doing a avoidance of the frustration in your mind and that kind of comes, of actually turning towards it and experiment with it. Like, try it next time you're in some conflict and you have that opportunity of turn towards it and be like, oh, this hurt. Actually, what's really going on here is that I'm in pain, right? The anger is covering that I was offended, that I felt unseen, that I felt dismissed, like something in that conflict. I felt judged. There's something painful under there that we're mad about. And so what if I just turn towards that core unpleasant feeling and soften around it and breathe some compassion towards it and some, right? Try that. And then also, when we're in conflict with somebody, and this is easier said than done a lot of the time, is actually try to see their pain. When somebody's being annoying, when somebody's being aggressive, when somebody's being difficult with you, if you pause and try to see, like, oh, I wonder what kind of pain this person is in. I have a friend who used to say, anytime somebody's unpleasant to be around, imagine what it's like to be in them. If they're unpleasant for us out here, they're being difficult. Imagine how hard it is for them to embody that annoying incarnation, that difficult personality, that impatient, that judgmental, that critical mind state that they're manifesting. And actually try to, with the eyes of compassion that see, wow, this person's really in pain. Experiment with that. You get some good results from what you've been doing. Try this practice for a little bit, see how it works. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Cool. Thank you. Last thoughts. Do this Tonglen practice every day. In the book, actually, I realized after I started the Tonglen that the meditation in the book is not the Tonglen practice. If you're reading along with the book, it starts on page 51. It's more of the traditional Theravadan, inclining the mind towards compassion by saying, may I learn to care about suffering and confusion. May I respond with mercy and empathy to pain. And may I be filled with compassion. So Tonglen is one technique. This is another technique that's in the book. You may have noticed at the end of the meditation, and I think where we're going, I don't know if we go next week. No, we go into forgiveness next week. But compassion needs to be balanced with equanimity. And so at the end of the meditation, I said, wishing may all beings learn to meet their own pain with compassion. It's this equanimity that understands we can't control other people. We can care about them, but we can't make them care about themselves. I hope that makes sense. And we'll get into that on the chapter on equanimity. So thank you for your practice, for your participation, your reflection on these teachings. And class is done by donation. If you can afford a $15 donation, you can go to the link that goes to the website where you can do PayPal or Venmo. If you appreciate what we are offering here at Against the Stream and you have the financial ability to, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. Again, that same link will take you there. And you can say, I'm just going to give $25 or $50 or $100 every month on this sort of auto donation system. And that really helps us, pay the rent. So if you can become a monthly supporter, please do. Or just a one-off donation for tonight. Gratefully accepted, gratefully appreciated. May any goodness that comes from our practice and discussion of the Buddha's Dharma be offered outward in all directions. May each of us develop immeasurable compassion for all living beings, and together may we create a positive change on this planet. Thank you, and see you next week for forgiveness.